Many people wrongly believe that affirmative action allows unqualified students to be admitted ahead of qualified students. This is not how college admissions work.
The U.S. Supreme Court has put an end to race-based affirmative action, and I'm going to break down this entire story. So I have a couple of clips, a lot of details. I will discuss what affirmative action is. I will discuss what the court decided. I will help to make this digestible, because when it comes to Supreme Court decisions, and this goes for all of them, it's a lot of legal jargon, a lot of mumbo jumbo that most people just cannot possibly internalize. So I'm going to help to educate you, the masses here, on what this actually is and what this means. So first, from The Guardian here, just the basics around the decision. The U.S. Supreme Court, driven by its conservative supermajority, ended race-conscious admissions at universities across the country, tossing out decades of precedent in American life. The conservative justices concluded that admissions policies at Harvard University and the University of North Carolina violated the U.S. Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. All right, so I'm going to get to a bit more of the details here, but first I want to show you President Joe Biden reacting to this, and he actually has a fairly good description of what affirmative action is and isn't.
The court has effectively ended affirmative action in college admissions, and I strongly disagree with the court's decision. Because affirmative action is so misunderstood, I want to be clear, make sure everybody's clear about what the law has been and what it has not been until today. Many people wrongly believe that affirmative action allows unqualified students to be admitted ahead of qualified students. This is not how college admissions work. Rather, colleges set out standards for admission, and every student has to meet those standards. Then and only then, after first meeting the qualifications required by the school, do colleges look at other factors in addition to their grades, such as race. The way it works in practice is this. Colleges first establish a qualified pool of candidates based on meeting certain grade, test scores, and other criteria. Then and only then, it is from this pool of applicants, all of whom have already met the school standards, that the class is chosen after weighing a wide range of factors, among them being race.
All right, so I don't often use President Joe Biden to help explain things for obvious reasons. He's not always the greatest communicator, but here he has a really good breakdown of what affirmative action is and isn't. There is a set standard in place. All students that meet it are qualified to make it into that college or university. And then at that point, there are decisions made based on what do we want to see in this classroom to help educate, help diversify the entire class based on lived experiences. This affirmative action helps to enrich the lives of all students because it helps to expose students to other backgrounds, other experiences that otherwise they have not been exposed to. It benefits everybody in the classroom, also helps to lead to hopefully grow empathy in students that may have not been able to see what life is like for people who don't look like them. So there's a variety of benefits to affirmative action, but of course, all students in that class have already met the qualifications, the basic qualifications for being in there. Affirmative action just helps to enrich the students' lives even further. Now, it's important to note as well that this is race-based affirmative action that is being overturned, because I'm going to get to the other kinds of affirmative action that exist that are not being overturned, not being touched. But first here, a breakdown on the specific cases from Reuters here. The Supreme Court decided 2 cases brought by students for fair admissions. A group headed by Edward Blum, a conservative legal strategist who has spent years fighting affirmative action. One case contended that Harvard's admissions policy unlawfully discriminates against Asian American applicants. The other asserted that the University of North Carolina unlawfully discriminates against white and Asian American applicants. The schools rejected those claims, saying race is determinative in only a small number of cases, and that barring the practice would result in a significant drop in the number of minority students on campus. You know, it's not surprising that you have an old white conservative here, a strategist in Edward Blum, using Asian Americans to push his agenda forward here and get affirmative action overturned. And several states have already done this. So as Reuters writes here, the decision on Thursday will force elite colleges and universities to revamp their policies and search for new ways to ensure diversity in their student populations. Many schools have said other measures would not be as effective, resulting in fewer minority students on campuses. And we know this because of the other states, or the states that have already done this. So the end of affirmative action in higher education in California, Michigan, Washington State, and elsewhere led to a steep drop in minority enrollment in the state's leading public universities. They are among 9 states that already prohibit any consideration of race in admissions to their public colleges and universities. The others are Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Nebraska, New Hampshire, and Oklahoma. So the steps put in place to try and mitigate the results of this have not really helped. They have still led to a steep drop in minority enrollment in those states. Now, this is a quote here from Sonia Sotomayor, who wrote in dissent of this decision. Ignoring race will not equalize a society that is racially unequal. What was true in the 1860s and again in 1954 is true today. Equality requires acknowledgement of inequality. Basically saying, pretending that things aren't unequal by removing something like affirmative action doesn't make the inequality go away. Now, of course, the conservative justices on the court here that decided against this or decided to overturn it, they don't care, obviously. And this is where we get to Clarence Thomas, because there's always some questions, maybe. I'm not sure if there's any more, but there's always talk around, why is Clarence Thomas, who is a black justice, why is he always voting with conservatives in all these cases that only hurt the black population? Here's a great clip here from NAACP President Derek Johnson on this.
The worst thing about affirmative action is that it created a Clarence Thomas who benefited from the program and now is in a position where he's going to deny many young African-American talented individuals an opportunity. Historically, the problem has been that institutions of higher learning, corporations, companies, and other entities have denied well-qualified African-Americans and other individuals access in terms of admissions, employment, because of their race.
So Derek Johnson there pointing out how affirmative action helped to get Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court in terms of his education and then eventually what he went on to do. And now he's voted to overturn it. It's worth noting as well, just to be clear here, that Clarence Thomas is just one vote. Everyone else that voted against this is white. And so, we shouldn't pretend like Clarence Thomas is the reason that this happened. Even if he didn't vote, it still would have passed. So just worth noting there. But the Clarence Thomas case is interesting because of who he is. And there's a great piece here, always a great piece, from Elie Mystal. Whenever there's a Supreme Court decision, I always look to what Elie Mystal is tweeting or writing about. And he always has really good insight into these decisions. He has a great piece here in The Nation that I suggest you, if you're into this case, read this. After this video, click the link below the video in the description box under sources. I'll link to this. Go read his piece. It's fantastic, but I'll take a few quotes out here. It's called "The Supreme Court Has Killed Affirmative Action. Mediocre Whites Can Rest Easier." And first, I'm going to pull a couple quotes from the case around Clarence Thomas. So Thomas considers himself a victim of affirmative action. In his autobiography, My Grandfather's Son, Thomas says his degree from Yale Law School, and he graduated in 1974, was never taken seriously because of affirmative action. He recounts painfully how white employers didn't believe that he could be as smart as his grades indicated because they believed that he was only there as an affirmative action admit. Most black people strive to overcome racial injustice. Thomas was broken by it. Instead of blaming the white folks doing the oppressing, Thomas has decided to ally with them and blame the policy meant to break their exclusive access to power. He's almost a tragic figure, a man who has adopted the white narrative about black people so completely that he's curdled into a mere spokesperson for that white narrative. Clarence Thomas is a very interesting figure because of the experiences that he went through and how it changed him in a way that has only helped him to ally with those injustices that exist in society. It's a very interesting and also in some ways tragic case of that sort of the impact of society and how it's impacted him. Now, there's also the other important this is a very important piece of this whole thing, is that, again, this is race-based affirmative action that is being overturned here. Because many will note, well, affirmative action actually benefits white women. So aren't you for overturning it? Because now it's all equal. Gender-based affirmative action is not being touched here. As Elie Mystal writes, yet you'll notice the Supreme Court did not ban gender consciousness in college admissions, nor did it ban legacy consciousness, wealth consciousness, geographic consciousness, or athletic consciousness. Race, and only race, is the thing that conservatives don't want colleges and universities to look at, because race is the card white people use that never gets declined. It is their most powerful characteristic, the one through which all else is possible. Think of all, and he actually, I'm going to quote him again in a second. This piece is too good. Like, I don't want to read the whole thing for you because I want you to click the article and read it. But going on to point out here how this is specifically about race. They are specifically targeting race-based admissions. How this can be looked at as anything except a racist decision is beyond me. This is clearly a racist decision. And another great example of that is this. So I love this quote so much I took it out and I posted it on Twitter. So he wrote here in the piece, I once talked to a white guy whose parents' name was on one of the buildings on campus, who asked me how it felt to know I got extra help to get in. So this is how clueless some of these privileged people are. This kid's last name is on one of the buildings. And he's talking to Elie Mystal about how Elie Mystal got extra help to get into college. Bro, your name's on the building. Like, just the complete level of delusion that exists and all the other benefits that exist to people who are often white and who get in because of whether it's connections, whether it's wealth. It's ongoing. And none of that, of course, is addressed in this case. And there's actually, as well, on that point, before I get to AOC's point here, Michelle Obama has a really great breakdown of what affirmative action meant to her and her experience in college, and it also goes to discuss that as well. I'll just pull out a quote from this because it's pretty long. Again, this is also worth reading. So she writes here, of course, students on my campus and countless others across the country were and continue to be granted special consideration for admissions. Some parents who graduate from the same school, others have families who can afford coaches to help them run faster or hit a ball harder. Others go to high schools with lavish resources for tutors and extensive standardized test prep that help them score higher on college entrance exams. We don't usually question if those students belong. So often we just accept that money, power, and privilege are perfectly justifiable forms of affirmative action, while kids growing up like I did are expected to compete when the ground is anything but level. Perfect. This is again, another great recount here of someone's experience with this, and it shows you just how one-sided this whole discussion is. Last thing here, just AOC quoting about this, saying if SCOTUS was serious about their ludicrous colorblindness claims, they would have abolished legacy admissions, also known as affirmative action, for the privileged. 70% of Harvard's legacy applicants are white. SCOTUS didn't touch that, which would have impacted them and their patrons. So, of course, it goes back to why these members are even on the court. It's these powerful groups with lots of money behind them that decide who the Republicans are going to put up next. And that's what you now have the court made up of, and why these decisions are all coming down the way they are.